Hi, I'm retired New York City Police Detective Vic Ferrari, and welcome to NYPD Through the Looking Glass podcast, where you'll get unique insight into the New York City Police Department. Before we get started, I encourage you to check out my Amazon author page, where you'll find my series of behind-the-scenes books, including my bestseller, NYPD Law and Disorder. Christmas is coming. All my books are $10 paperback, $2.99 ebook download. Pick them up now on Amazon. You'll get them in a couple of days. It's a great $10 Christmas gift or stocking stuffer. I usually record Wednesday or Thursday, but if you're watching or following the news, there's another hurricane bearing down on the state of Florida, so I figured I'd record this on Sunday just before the games start. And so if something comes up during the week and I don't cover it, it's not that I missed it, it's I don't know if I'm going to have power, so I figured I'd get this thing wrapped up before I got to batten down the hatches here. So let's go to before we get started with this week's story, let's go to what's going on in the New York Post True Crime section. 2 teens have been charged in an attack on ex-New York State Governor David Paterson and his stepson, according to sources. The juveniles turned themselves into police along with their parents at the 23rd Street Precinct, that's Upper East Side, less than 24 hours after the attack on Paterson and his stepson, Anthony Chester Silva, as the pair walked their dog on the Upper East Side Friday. The alleged assailants are facing second-degree assault charges, police say. Again, I never advocate violence against anyone, whether I like you or not. I just find it ironic that the ex-governor and his party, whose policies are responsible for what's going on in New York and the havoc that's there, I don't like to see it. I don't like to see anybody screwed with, but, maybe that'll say, be the wake-up light, like, hey, maybe we should start taking crime seriously and do away with these ridiculous things like bail reform. Speaking of crime, almost 24 disheveled squatters tormented and terrorized the residents and businesses surrounding a vacant $4 million Brooklyn brownstone they commandeered. The young miscreants stole packages off neighbors' porches, threatened passerbyers, damaged private property, got high on a stoop, and set fireworks off in the early morning hours, neighbors told the Post. The 3-story building at 60 South 4th Street in South Williamsburg was finally emptied this week after police forced the squatters back out onto the sidewalk. They also arrested Ryan Grewell, 26 years old and old enough to know better, who was charged with felony criminal mischief for damaging a motorcycle outside Jane Motorcycles, an NYPD spokesman said. I can guarantee you that they're already back in that building, or someone else is back in that building, because that's another thing New York City doesn't take seriously as far as squatters. They're like, well, it's better than they're not off the street, and then you're never going to get them out. It's like termites. I don't know what New York's doing. I really don't. Now, this one's funny. An NYPD sergeant in the Internal Affairs Bureau claims he found a half-empty bottle of liquor in his captain's car, but when he reported it to his bosses, it became last call for the cop's career. You think? Michelangelo Hidalgo, 42 years old, alleges in a new lawsuit that in July 2023, his boss, Captain Janine King, asked him to take her unmarked department vehicle to the car wash. That's the last time she's going to do that. While he and another sergeant drove it there, they heard clinking coming from the back seat and looked to find bottles hitting each other, rolling around, according to the suit. Hidalgo said his colleagues demanded they report the booze discovery to the Internal Affairs Bureau in case it was planted as part of an integrity test. Such undercover stings are employed to make sure police officers follow the rules. Hidalgo and his captain had been great friends, right, working together, what's known as Group 26, which investigates police misconduct according to a September filing. Prior to the incident, it was rumored, now this is per the New York Post, not me, Miss King was an alcoholic. The suit alleges, adding the department cleaner had previously commented that King had passed out drunk in her office regularly. Well, if Janine King does have a problem, they're probably going to send her to the farm, as we were talking about in my last podcast, the NYPD's Alcohol Rehabilitation Center. I find it ironic that someone in Internal Affairs is tattletaling or reporting their supervisor. But IAB makes you paranoid with these integrity tests, and I think I've spoken to that a couple of times on this podcast, where they'll plant stuff in locations and call you there or leave stuff out in the open, and if you take it, you're getting arrested, or if you just ignore it and pretend you didn't see it, or maybe even if you didn't see it, they're going to hit you with charges and specifications. I've told the story that my sergeant and I were in the Kingsbridge section of the Bronx, Two homeless women approached me with a shopping cart and told me they found a shotgun. I asked them where they lived. They said the female and women's shelter. They looked homeless until I looked at their shoes. Nice try. I told them I'm going to voucher the shotgun. Have your supervisor come to the precinct and pick up a copy of the voucher. They gave me a dirty look. I vouchered the shotgun as found property. I wrote down their bogus names, and, of course, they carried no ID. And what do you know? An hour or two later, someone from the Internal Affairs Bureau came and picked up the shotgun from the precinct. So they create paranoia, and it backfired on them. But I hope this woman, if she is an alcoholic, gets the help that she needs. An NYPD officer was hit with hefty fines last month for harassing a frequent 311 caller several years ago with phone messages in which the officer imitated her former boyfriend and then played recordings of sheep, dolphins, and seals. So this guy is prank phone calling this woman who's basically calling up to complain about the cops. The childless member of New York's finest, Brendan Sullivan, was apparently retaliating against the 52-year-old Brooklynite Paul Vogel because Vogel called the complaint line hundreds of times to report police cars and fire trucks that often parked on the city's sidewalks and crosswalks, according to the New York Times, the paper that's unfit to print. Sullivan, a 17-year vet, will pay the price, a $500 fine to the city's Conflict of Interest Board. That's new to me. I've never even heard of such a thing. Which found he tried to discourage a citizen from exercising his constitutional right about government action. He will also lose 60 days worth of leave, which is about $25,000. So in my time, they were just starting this with fining people, but I never heard something of $500. And usually the most they were going to give, like, you got fired, and then one up from that was the loss of 30 vacation days and a year on disciplinary probation, which means if you screw up at all, they can just, pull the plug on you. Now they're taking 60 days. What's next? 120 days. They just keep thumping these cops. But, I mean, it's a stupid move. There was a guy, when I first got to a unit, there was a guy there. Oh, this is a wild story. This should be the story I should tell. You know what? I'm going to save that. I'm going to save that for the end. Stripper sues New York City club for allegedly denying her meal breaks. An exotic dancer is suing Gallagher's 2000 in federal court for not giving her proper half-hour meal breaks, according to a federal lawsuit. Rosanna Quison, 24 years old, says the Queen's Jiggle Joint never paid her minimum wage during her 2 years there. It also deducted a house fee, $50 to $70 a night. Her house mom fee, $20, and a DJ fee, $20, Wednesday through Saturday, court papers say. What can I say? She works hard for the money. This is another wild story. An elderly man died more than 47 years after he was shot in East Harlem, and now his death has been ruled a homicide, authorities said this week. Paul Dawkins was blasted in the chest on East 103rd Street and 2nd Avenue around 6:40 a.m. on January 15th, 1976, cops said. Dawkins, who lived a few blocks from the scene, suffered injuries on April 22nd, 2023. Police said he was 79 years old. The city medical examiner's office deemed Dawkins' death a homicide, authorities announced Tuesday night. NYPD cannot confirm the circumstances of the decades-old shooting Wednesday, nor how Dawkins' death was linked to a gunshot. Oh, I can explain it. So that happens sometimes where someone shoots somebody and they live, and then usually, I mean, it depends on the jurisdiction. It's anywhere from a year to 5 years, maybe 10 years. If the person dies because they couldn't get the bullet out and the bullet moves, or they get an infection from the bullet, so the person originally got charged with attempted murder, they'll pull them out and recharge them with the homicide because they say that the action actually caused their death soon after. This is 47 years later. I don't know the circumstances about it. I can guess that it's political, that somebody in his family has kept up with this, obviously, because who'd have known this guy was shot 47 years ago? So his family's got some juice, so they've been on top of it, and they've been badgering the city, and it's rare that New York City acts on anything. But, yeah, someone's going to get charged. Or, you know what, 47 years ago, I'm wondering if the guy that shot him is dead or in jail. Probably one or the other. So I was talking about someone pranking somebody on the phone and NYPD cops getting caught pranking people on the phone. I had just gotten to this unit, and this guy had just left, had just gotten kicked out of the unit. So I never met him. And I heard the story that he had started dating our integrity control officer's daughter, which you don't do that because an integrity control officer monitors corruption at the precinct level, and the guy can make your life a living hell. But anyway, he started dating his supervisor's daughter. And it didn't work out. She broke up with him, I'm guessing, or he broke up with her. Whatever happened, this cop or somebody in his family starts calling this girl up and hanging up and leaving all these messages and just harassing the hell out of her. So the Internal Affairs Bureau gets involved, and they trace the calls to this guy's house, and they want blood. I mean, are you crazy? You're a grown man and you're calling this girl up. You're a cop and you're hanging up. And well, his father stepped forward and took the hit and said it was me. I was so distraught after this girl broke up with my son. I did it. Do I believe that happened? No, but that was the answer. The cop still lost some vacation time, and he got transferred out or he got promoted or whatever. So a year or 2, 3 years later, I'm looking for a place to buy. I'm looking for a condominium. And I see on the wall in the precinct, there's a note, like a flyer, and it says there's a condo for sale in Westchester County. So I'm looking at it, and my friend who knew the guy says, what are you looking at? And I says, a cop that used to work here is selling this condominium. He goes, don't get involved with that guy. Well, he says, I'm not getting involved with him. I'm thinking about, it looks, the price is right and everything and the location. He goes, Vic, I'm just telling you. He's a different kind of guy. Don't waste your time with him. He's going to frustrate you to no end. So I'm young and stupid. I said, all right, thanks, but no thanks. Get on the phone. I call the guy up. Very friendly, telling me, everything about the place, and he put this in it, and parquet floors and all this. And I said, all right. I says, give me a couple of days. I'll call you back, and we'll set up a date and time. Right now I'm really busy. My brother was getting married. So a day later, he calls me, hey, Vic, when you coming up, blah, 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 like just constant with the calling, right? So it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. So finally he gets me on the phone, and I says, I told you to give me a call. He goes, well, if you're not interested in buying this condo, I'm not going to waste my friggin' time on you. And he hangs up the phone on my ear, and I go, wow, this guy's got a quick fuse, just to do something like that. So anyway, I forgot about the guy. I had heard other stories about him, but again, he's a different kind of guy. So probably about 7 or 8 years later, my buddy that warned me about him, we happened to wind up working in the same unit years later. He goes, I want to show you something. And he hands me this article in the paper. And he goes, you recognize the name? And I go, is that the guy? And he goes, yeah. Well, apparently, this guy had a problem saying goodbye to ex-girlfriends. And he was dating this girl. And she broke up with him. And he was stalking her. And I think the cops got involved. Then he abducted her and took her over to New Rochelle, dragged her out of the car, beat her, and stabbed her so many times. I think she almost lost her arm or her hand, and he left her in the woods. And he got caught, and he wound up doing close to 20 years in jail. So obviously this guy had problems with, I think he's out now, but obviously this guy had problems with women. And had a problem with letting go. But, when you're 13 years old and you prank somebody, like my brother and I used to call the PBS telethon and break their balls. But we were like, again, 11 to 13 years old, a grown man with something to lose, a member of the New York City Police Department. And I get that this guy probably was a pain in the ass calling this 311 number and bringing all sorts of heat on the precinct for guys parking on the sidewalk. But that's not the way to go about it. Matter of fact, there's no way to go about it. You're a public servant. You shouldn't get involved in childish nonsense like that. So last week, I had two of my buddies on, Marty and Mike, and we were talking about stories, about things that happened in the New York City Police Department during time in the 50th Precinct. And my buddy Mikey was telling the story how he got jammed up. He was in a car going home, and they had a couple of cocktails, and the other cop shot a couple of rounds in the floorboards of his car. And Mikey was saying that the captain that was interviewing him was like, well, how did one shot go off in the car? And Mikey says, well, it was 3. And the guy puts the pen down. He goes, how are you going to explain 3 shots in a car? Like, and then he asked him, he goes, you're too, the captain told Mikey, he goes, you're too dumb to sell drugs. What are you going to do after your police career? So I had a funny story with that captain. He was a burly guy. He kind of looked like George the Animal Steel from wrestling. Like he was balding, but very stocky, big Polish guy. I got a kick out of him. He was a character. He would bark at you in non sequiturs and just change the subject on a moment's notice. And I used to think it was an act, but it wasn't. He was all over the place. I liked the guy, and he got jammed up later, and I'll go into that. So it's probably, I had just gotten back from the narcotics division, and I was doing days. And I think I had like station house security, so I'm just kind of hanging around the desk, making sure no one bothers the desk officer. I'm looking at my watch. It's getting close to going home time. Captain comes running in the back door of the precinct, and he says, what are you doing? I says, I got station house security, boss. He goes, great. He goes, go get the cars to an R&P, police car. He goes, and don't go anywhere. I need you to come with me. I said, okay, boss. So he takes his stuff. He runs into his office. He comes running. Come on. So we jump in the radio car, and he goes, get on the Deegan and go north. I said, all right. And he's not telling me like what this is about. I thought he was going to the next precinct and he wanted a driver because we started heading up towards the 4-7. So we get on the Deegan. He goes, get off at 233rd Street. So I get off at 233rd Street. He goes, loop around and come southbound on the Deegan. So I said, all right. So I'm like, okay. He lives upstate. He must have come down the Deegan and saw a car accident, which I didn't see going north. What does this guy see? So it snowed a couple of days earlier. So now the snow is kind of turning black. It's melting. It's miserable out. You know, typical New York gray sky. He gets to a certain part of the highway. He goes, put the emergency lights on and pull off to the side. So I pull off to the side. He goes, come on. So we get out of the car, and there's a dead dog. And I'm just looking at him. He goes, would you look at that? I said, yeah. It's a dead dog. I mean, dogs get hit by cars all the time. He goes, Ferrari, get your thumb out of your ass. He goes, and see if there's a camera in the car. I said, all right. So it was a sergeant's car. It was probably the one car that the one Polaroid, and cops will understand this. Every precinct had 1 or 2 Polaroids in the precinct, and that shit went right out the front door. It had a Polaroid. Takes the Polaroid from me, and he is just snapping photos of this large, mangy dog. And he's snapping photos of it. And I said, boss, is this a crime scene or something? He goes, what? I says, why are we taking pictures of this dog? And he goes, dog? He goes, this is a North American coyote. Now, I'm from the Bronx. I'm a city kid. Now I know the difference, but back then I didn't know the difference between a coyote and a dog. And I go, oh, okay. He goes, it probably followed the Metro North tracks down and probably was looking for food. He was a hunter. So he knew what a coyote would do and how the coyote wound up on the Major Deegan southbound expressway south of West 233rd Street. So I said, okay. I says, and we're almost getting hit by trucks, right? We got the lights on. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The Deegan is starting to really pick up with volume traffic. He goes, you got a tarp in the trunk? I said, yeah, probably. Why? He goes, well, come on, go get it. I says, we're going to cover it? Like it's a dead body? He goes, no, we're going to take it. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, this guy has lost his mind. Like I always thought he was a little out there. And I was like, okay. So I get the tarp. I mean, he's a deputy inspector. I'm a cop. I bring the tarp out. I got gloves on. We pick this thing up. It's disgusting, right? Pick up, and it's probably about 60 pounds. We pick up this 60-pound coyote. We put it in the tarp. We wrap it. It was like a scene out of Goodfellas. He goes, put it in the trunk. So we carry it, and we put it in the trunk. And we're driving to the zoo. Oh, and he goes, take me to the Bronx Zoo. I thought he wanted to bury this thing in the park. And he's like, take me to the Bronx Zoo. So we're getting closer and closer to the zoo. And he's calling his friends up. He had a cell phone. He's like, yeah, Nick, you're not going to believe what I found. He must have made like 4 calls on his cell phone. And we get to the Bronx Zoo, and I go, what are we going to do? What does the Bronx Zoo want? You want them to like positively identify it? He goes, Fry goes, what are you, a moron? He goes, I'm 100% sure this is a coyote. I go, why are we bringing a dead coyote? Like, you going to feed it? I don't know. Are you going to feed this thing to the lions or something? He goes, no, we're going to put it in a tank with the beetles. Of course, like, this guy has lost his mind. So some guy from the zoo comes out, like, and then he starts making calls, and like all these zoologists, I guess what they're called, they come out, and they're fascinated with this rotting corpse in the trunk of our car. So we take it into a room, and the zoologist turns to the deputy inspector. He goes, do you want me to put it in with the beetles? I'm like, what the fuck? What is this with the beetles? So I asked, what is this? And they go, they put the carcass in this tank of beetles, and the beetles eat everything. Apparently, they eat the skin, the hair. The deputy inspector wanted the skull for his hunting collection, I guess. I mean, those who collect skulls. So, it was interesting to say the least. I got an hour or two overtime. We go back to the precinct. A day or two later, he comes barreling into the precinct again, and he goes, go change your shirt. You look like shit. And I was like, okay. So I go downstairs. I put another shirt on. And he goes, CNN is coming. They're going to interview us about the coyote. And I was like, okay. And this older woman from CNN came. And it was then I learned about the power of the media and how editing can make you look like a complete, absolute moron. So he was really good in the interview. I mean, and he's a character. I had never been on camera before except family 8mm movies. So she talked to me for 10 minutes. And I didn't throw him under the bus with his erratic behavior, but at the same time, I explained what happened. The only thing they took of that clip was I said, I thought it was a dog. Bink. So I thought nothing of it. And then the next thing you know, when that thing aired, I didn't have a cell phone because it was the early 90s. He did. He had a department phone, which looked like a brick. My answering machine light is blinking like a Christmas tree. We saw you on CNN. We saw you on CNN. So he was a character. I really liked him. He was tough, but he was fair. But what wound up happening to him was he was prone to saying things he shouldn't have. I don't think he meant anything by it. But there were a couple of female cops in the precinct that didn't like what he had to say. I don't know exactly what happened to transpire because I had already left the precinct and I wasn't privy to it. But they got a federal lawsuit against him and they won. And again, I don't know exactly the particulars of it, but I know there were 3 female cops in my precinct that filed a federal lawsuit against him. Maybe for sexual harassment or hostile work environment. I really don't know. But what I do know is he wound up retiring or resigning. I think he kept his pension, but I know they won a judgment against him, and it was fairly large. So, again, it was just a story of my days in the New York City Police Department 100 years ago. So, again, if you're those poor people in North Carolina that got hit with that hurricane, my heart goes out to you. Us in Florida, we're gonna get blasted. It looks like now a Category 3. I'll try to get another episode out next week if I can. I don't know if I'm going to have power. I don't know if I'm going to have a house. But as always, I want to thank everyone for tuning in, especially my listeners in Manchester, United Kingdom, Brooklyn, New York, Cambridge, Ontario, Bill Bixby, Oklahoma, Edwards, Colorado, Meriden, Ohio, and Oviedo, Florida. If you work in law enforcement and have an interesting criminal background, drop me a note on Twitter or Instagram at VicFerrari50. If you're watching this on YouTube, please hit the subscribe and like button. And I can't believe last week's podcast. I got to tell you guys, I was nervous about putting 2 of my friends on there. I had never done an interview with 2 other guests, and I was afraid that during the interview, my friends and I would start talking and the audience wouldn't know what we were referencing or talking about. But I can't believe that thing. I mean, it's only like 3 or 4 days old. It's already got probably about 1,200 views. I'm shocked. I really thought it would only get maybe 100 or 200 views because I figured we'd be talking over each other. People like, what the hell are these guys talking about? And a couple of times I had to stop and set up what my friends were saying because they're not used to it. They don't do this. And Marty and Mike, thank you again for coming on and, you know, making that a successful podcast. If you enjoy the content, check out my Amazon author page. Type in my name, Vic, Ferrari Like the Car, where you can preview all my behind-the-scenes NYPD books for free. They're $10 paperback, $2.99 ebook download. Again, Christmas is coming. Just order a $10 book and wrap it up, or don't wrap it up and throw it in the stocking. Again, I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and I'll see you guys hopefully soon. Take care.